Hello, welcome to the Mark Atwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. How's it going? This spiritual war that we're in, for me, has always been about the children, as most of you know. In fact, I'm going to start today's show with a little reminder of where my position is on this.
We see you. The scales have fallen from our eyes. The veil has drifted down from the sky, meandering firmly, finally revealing your depth of depravity. That's fear you're now feeling. We see you. Your demonic bloodlust laid bare to see, the statue of filth on the BBC, the prince and the madam, the Crispus spy, the islands of horrors in the ocean lie. We see you. A billion souls stolen over the years. You hid them deep down to drown their tears. Perfect and innocent, God's own creations, mutilated by your sick machinations. We see you. Vlad the Impaler and his vile descendants, fleeing the palace from the 5D ascendants. The virus distracted, but gave us the time to peel back the layers of your heinous crimes. We see you. Run, run as fast as you can, back for more orders from the Phoenician clan. Out of White Rabbit, the looking glass cracked. Tipping point reached, odds against you now stacked. We see you. Pizza and hot dogs, pasta and sauce. Your sickness decoded your lack of remorse. Our slumber is over, our eyes not wide shut. For the children of Haiti, a knife to your gut. We see you. Ascension is powered by the light of the flare. Scramble like rats to the ruins of your lairs. It's over, it's over. Save our children, we cry. Revealed, reviled. It's your soul's time to die. We see you.
So you can, if you've never seen that before, I made that about 5 years ago. And really, it's the reason why I make this podcast. 22,000 children go missing every single day worldwide, since the Second World War at least. Those are official statistics. People argue with me about those statistics, but if you go and look up, if you go onto Yandex and type in 8 million children missing each year, you'll find an article from 2014 from the Irish Mirror, which states that figure because they have to tell you everything. They have to hide it in plain sight because of the universal law of karma. Most of you watching will know that I grew up in a village in Northamptonshire in the 70s, and I was surrounded by a religious cult that grew in financially, and it grew in terms of taking over houses and farms and businesses. And that cult was called the Jesus Fellowship, which became the Jesus Army. The founder of that cult was a man called Noel Stanton, who was a lay preacher at Budbrook Church of England in the 1950s. He abused my dad when he was a choir boy and multiple other boys. That church ended up being closed down in 2018, I think, because of the sheer volume of cases against that church for abuse, child sexual abuse. In one of my other poems, there's a line where I say, Jimmy Savile was the tip of the berg. You're surrounded by pedophiles that steal and eat children in underground tunnels that go on for thousands of miles. It's on everybody's doorstep. It is the most shameful part of humanity. And it's the reason why we must speak out. It's the reason why survivors of child sexual abuse are, in my opinion, amongst the bravest people that humanity's ever produced. And recently, I was looking on Twitter and I came across a gentleman called Keith Hinchcliffe, and his posts touched me deeply. And he describes himself here as a CSA survivor fighting for justice, CPTSD, speaking out on my journey to justice since coming forwards. DM for interviews. So I DM'd Keith, and I'm very pleased to say he's joining me here today. Hi, Keith.
Hi.
Very pleased to meet you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, thanks very much, Mark.
Do you want to tell us your story?
Yeah, I can give you a brief overview of it in terms of where it started, the abuse. So I was living in a sort of normal or normalish family scenario. And then I have a younger brother and an older sister. We were living in the Richmond Twickenham area. I started to be abused by my own sister initially from around the age of 11, and it progressed into a situation where I was then being abused by her then boyfriend a little later on. His name was Philip John Saunders, and he was abusing me for approximately just over 3 years. I was in senior school at the time, and I ended up leaving school because of the abuse. I just bottomed out. Education welfare picked up on that, and so did social services. And I was then placed in the children's home, Grafton Close. The abuse was still continuing throughout the 3 years and through the time that I was at Grafton Close Children's Home. I was only at Grafton Close Children's Home for approximately 10 weeks, although Saunders had access to me there, open access to me there, could get to me and take me out and abuse me still. And whilst I was in Grafton Close, my link worker that was assigned to me propositioned me for sex as well. For those of you who don't know about Grafton Close, it's renowned for its child abuse. It's one of those that are out there in the media. So I kept this secret with me, buried, hidden. No one knew about the abuse or what had happened to me throughout my life, up until 2019. And I ended up disclosing to initially the police about the abuse, about Saunders, and then the Met Police about my sister and the situation in Grafton Close with the Met Police. I did a 2-hour interview at my house in Monmouthshire at the time with the Thames Valley Police, and they took the 2-hour interview and all the information I gave them and went away. And it wasn't for sort of 12 months. There was some contact with them in between, but 12 months they came back to me and said they couldn't find this individual. He wasn't around, and they couldn't locate him, which I thought was preposterous, really, because he had to be. In my view, it just wasn't feasible that he wasn't around. He certainly didn't disappear off the face of the planet. So with the frustration of that, I thought, well, if the police can't find him, well, I'm certainly going to. So within a few hours of having some contact on the internet, some connections, I managed to locate him. Not only did I locate him, I found his birth certificate, marriage certificate, located him and put him at the address that he was abusing me at the time in Langley and Slough, and various other pieces of information. I passed that back on to the Thames Valley Police, and they reopened the investigation. Subsequently, another detective took it on, and we ended up in the Crown Court back in October 2024, where he was prosecuted for all the abuse that he perpetrated towards me. Some of that abuse was horrific. It reshaped me as a person. My personality was reshaped. Who I became as a person was reshaped, and I've now at this time realized and looked at my life, and I can understand how the decisions I've made in life and the things that I've done in life were all stemmed from that abuse. So that's the trauma that occurs. And that's kind of the story, really. That's the basis of what happened to me.
Thank you for sharing that. I know it's not easy to share stories like this, and there's a few things that come to mind. The first thing that hits me is your sister.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever heard of that before. That's extraordinary. And then the police couldn't find him, and you found him in half an hour.
Yeah, a couple of hours it took, really. I did have some assistance with that. I mean, it wasn't just me. I've got to say that. I'm not going to disclose who did help me, but yeah, I mean, literally, it was all public information. It wasn't difficult, to locate him and place him at that particular place. It wasn't difficult to find him either. I will go on to say now, I mean, I wasn't aware up until the court case or after the court case that actually the truth of the matter was he was actually on the sexual offenders register, and he was known by the NCA as well for 2 other cases. He was prosecuted in The Hague for abusing 2 boys, and he was also prosecuted for abusing what is his wife's daughter as well in 2005. But that was all known to the NCA. That was all known to the police. It was all known to them prior to me coming forward. So yeah, obviously I set up a complaint with Thames Valley and said, look, had I not pursued this, we would never have got to the prosecution. So that was the first hurdle I came across, really, in terms of going forward and trying to achieve justice.
Do you know why they couldn't find him?
I don't know exactly why. There wasn't really a full explanation. I was given several excuses about how they operated and how they worked things in the background. But to be honest with you, I think it was just poor detective work. To be honest with you, I think it was just poor. It just didn't seem to be any interest in looking at historical cases, or certainly my case. They seemed to be working more on what they felt was more meat on the bone, if you like, live cases. Live cases take precedent, obviously, because there's a danger involved immediately there and then. So historic cases get stepped back, even though they're just as important to the victim. It doesn't always work that way. You can get put back, and unfortunately I've seen that my case wasn't as important to them as other cases, it would seem.
You didn't get any sense of a connection between those police men or women and the abuser of any kind?
No, none whatsoever. No.
Fair play. Okay. So you said that you buried it, and all the decisions in your life were affected by it. I think that's an important thing to bring up, because it's an epidemic.
Yeah, actually. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really until I came forward and started looking at this and realizing all the pitfalls and understanding, and then subsequently when I went to the council and the Richmond upon Thames Council, who ran Grafton Close, and I got some responses from them when I disclosed to them what had happened, that I really started to understand the cover-up situation and the fact that it's consistently buried, and we have a society today that still does it. I found it extraordinary, really, that no one was taking this seriously. It didn't seem so anyway. It's almost like it was like, yeah, it just goes on, so therefore we accept it kind of situation. And I found it for me. I found it really, really difficult to comprehend the fact that it is life changing for any survivor. And I can explain how it is life changing. When you're affected by trauma very early on in life, and something like sexual abuse, so you will always deal with it in the format that you are. So you're, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15, however old you are during that time, you will bury it. Because you're not equipped with a tool set to be able to deal with it or cope with it. Just as an adult is not able to deal with a trauma situation like rape, standard rape, I say standard rape, but a rape, for example, on a single occasion, you have to sort of bear in mind that a child that's been sexually abused goes through that on multiple occasions. So that happens over a period of 3 years, and it's multiple times. So we adjust, and then we bury it. And then when it stops, we try to move on. And what stops us from speaking out is the threat, the shame, and the fact you just can't operate on that level. So you have to do something with it. So you bury it, you suppress it, and you try to move on with your life. But what you don't realize when you're suppressing that is the effect that it has on you on a daily basis, which is that anger's being suppressed, the frustration's being suppressed, the anxiety is suppressed, all the emotions that come with the fear and trauma. But you tend to cope or try to cope with it and think that you can. The truth is you can't. And you end up in this situation where I was drinking heavily to try and get rid of it. I was taking drugs to try and get rid of it. This addiction process kicks in. I was gambling, all of those kind of things throughout my 20s and into my late 20s, into my 30s. And then I realized that actually I had this addictive nature, but I wasn't really sure what was causing it. So I managed to stop drinking, smoking, taking drugs, gambling, all those things. And I didn't have any education at all. So I was just sort of getting through life the best that I could. I think I found that it was when I disclosed that I looked back and I started to speak to psychologists and counselors that I realized that actually the key thing that made all these things occur for me was the trauma and the abuse. And I realized that actually, every child that's abused, that is threaded through their lifespan. When I speak to survivors now, and I spoke to many from Grafton Close, some of them had suffered greatly from that home. Some of them, really, really, really struggled. One in particular, David Harris, that's spoken out. I've spoken to him on many occasions, and his life is just destroyed by it through drink and drugs, basically. So he can cope and manage with the trauma that happened to him. So I think all of those things are important to understand about survivors. So it isn't just the abuse that happens; it's the lifelong trauma that you still live with. I still live with CPTSD, which is they call it complex PTSD because it is slightly different to ordinary PTSD. So the flashbacks don't occur just in the brain; they can be triggered at any time. If you're out, you can end up with an anxiety situation. Or it could be anywhere. It can happen at any time, or there could be days where you just simply don't want to go out and face the public. And I know it sounds bizarre, but it is that's the reality of CPTSD, and that's what happens. And some people have it far more severe than others, and it's a lifelong thing. It stays with you forever. There is you can get it looked after, but I don't think I'll ever get rid of it. It'll never go for me.
So he's in prison
at the moment. I think he may well have been let out by now.
Oh, you wouldn't be able to know?
No, well, that's the other thing. They don't as much as you'd expect them to come and tell you whether he's in or out or what's going on there. They don't. There's no communication whether he's in or out.
Yeah. And when did you decide to be public about this, and what's your objective?
Well, the objective was really, as I go back to where I was speaking to the council when I wrote to them about the abuse at Grafton Close, and I said, look, this had gone on for me, but actually it had gone on post the scenarios that we know about John Stingmore and Tony McSweeney. And if you're familiar with the story, I mean, it's out there, you can go and read about it. But actually my situation was post that time. So it was beyond that slot in time. I was at Grafton Close in 1984. So what I wanted to really explain to the council was, naively, I wanted to explain to the council that the abuse pattern and the openness about abuse being able to happen within the home was still apparent, and it was still there. So the question for me really to them was, what did you do to mitigate any risk really for kids that were renting in that home beyond the Stingmore situation? And the response I got back really was shut down. They didn't want to know. There was a lot of denial. I asked for my records as well, and they wouldn't give me any. They said they didn't have them. So in the end, I made about 7-8 FOI requests. And they eventually sent me some documentation that showed and proved that I was actually at the home. But they said they didn't have anything else. And I'm pretty sure they do. They just don't want it to come out. So I thought, well, okay, this is just ridiculous. It's not right. So I think it's right that I go public now and tell my story. And ultimately what they wanted to do in the end is push me to insurance solicitors to try and get rid of me.
Yeah.
This never really was about redress or redress from the council, but that's where they pushed me to, because they didn't want to deal with it themselves. They didn't know how to deal with it, so they just pushed me off to the insurance solicitors to deal with, which was, again, another kick in the teeth, because they just simply come back to you and say to you that you've got to prove all this situation, but despite having a conviction, despite doing all these hours and hours of interviews with the police and telling your story, they still want some level of evidence to prove that you were there. I mean, and they start quoting case law like the Paul case and that kind of scenario to try and push you away. And again, I thought this was extraordinary. So yeah, I thought it's time to waive my anonymity and tell my story, because I felt that I probably wasn't the only one. And lo and behold, no, I wasn't. I'd spoken to multiple survivors from Grafton Close, and they've all been in the same situation, and they've all been treated in exactly the same way. So yeah, it was really to expose that initially, until I became aware of the much bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And I felt that actually there needs to be much more done. I became aware of the IICSA and the recommendations off the back of that, and how that's been failed in government.
What's that?
The inquiry, the national inquiry, the IICSA.
What does IICSA stand for?
Well, it's the independent it was the inquiry that the government did. They spent about 200 million quid on this inquiry.
Is this the one that Tom Watson stood up in Parliament about 12
Yeah, that's the one. Ago? Yeah.
So that just for the viewers, that was very interesting, because I think Theresa May was Prime Minister, wasn't she? She was, yeah, and she was the one that was primarily behind it and kicked it off, really. Yeah. She was her first action when she became Home Secretary was to delete all references to her father, who was best friends with a famous paedophile. Did you know that? I wasn't aware of that, no. Yeah. So as she was in charge, there was no way that was ever going to go anywhere properly. And of course, that was around the time that the Elm Guest House was being exposed, wasn't it? For its second run. Yeah, It was originally exposed back in the early 80s. Yeah, Stingmore was prosecuted in 81. Prosecuted in 80. It was arrested in 81, prosecuted in 83. Lots of questions were asked. There was lots of things pointed in certain directions about Elm Guest House, as well as the procurement of kids from Grafton Close to using it from Guest House. They're very close, aren't they? Yeah, they are. Yeah. So one was a feed-in for the other one.
Yeah.
Just so viewers who might not know, the Elm Guest House was operating in the 60s and 70s and 80s as for a VIP, what they call a VIP paedophile ring, which means MPs, celebrities, lots of names on a list there came out, including the name Kitty, for example, which was Cliff Richard's nickname, and Melvin Bragg, and other notable names from the time. And Cliff Richard, of course, was famously gifted a pass for some reason, even though I think he's as guilty as hell. But so basically for 40 years, Keith, were you suppressing all those memories, or were you just dealing with them? Did you know, how did this affect your, well, it's two questions there, really. I mean, firstly, were they all suppressed? Did you put them all in a box, or so you just kind of tried to forget about them?
Yeah.
And that led to you just not having a particularly good life. And then what was the trigger that made you go, okay, is it because they started popping up, or is
no, I think what I'd seen was society becoming more aware, and certainly around the Jimmy Savile case.
Yeah.
And it seemed that it was more acceptable, if you like, to come forward and speak out. You were accepted a lot more than we would have been in the past, and certainly in terms of being believed about what had happened, because you've been abused in such a way, it's coercive, controlling behavior. You do not feel or recognize yourself as being part of society. You feel less than because of that abuse. You just, that is where you put yourself. You put yourself down because of it, because you blame yourself. That is why we don't have a lot of individuals coming forward and speaking out like myself as regularly as we might like. Let's put it that way. And that really is how paedophiles manage to achieve their ends. You know, that's their power, really. I saw the Jimmy Savile situation. I looked at it, and again, it was just recognizable straight away. I was listening to the survivors from that, and I felt it might be time for me to consider speaking out, or at least going to the police. I never really thought I'd get to the point where I'd waive anonymity or speak out about it in the way that I have been. And I think it was important for me to do that, because I think I recognized that actually the effects that it had on me, and I needed to do something with it.
Yeah.
And I got to that point in my life where I just thought, yeah, let's do this, let's do something with it. And I did. In the end, I decided to do that. What I didn't realize was quite what it would be to get to the justice point.
Yeah, it's an arduous journey, right?
Yeah, it's not easy. Every survivor is different. Every situation is different. But until we go on that journey, until we speak out, I mean, we're still in control of the way we've always been in control by that paedophile in the first place, because that's exactly what they want, your silence. So speaking out it gives you back the power, it gives you back the control over your own life, rather than the paedophile that's been controlling it to make you suppress the thoughts in the first place. So yeah, that's a realization for me.
Well, that's why I wanted to interview you, because I think every time something like this gets out there, like in this kind of format, it empowers somebody else.
Yeah.
And, I used the word, what did I say? Endemic? Did I say endemic? I think I did.
Yeah. Because it is endemic.
It really is endemic. I mean, it was about 10 years ago when I stood in my garden and it just hit me that pretty much every member of my family had been abused.
Yeah.
All the way backwards in history as well. And it was a big moment for me, because I was like, fuck. Including myself. I wasn't abused like horrifically like you, but I was, there was and it's always, do you ever get the sense, apart from the paedophiles relying upon your silence because of the guilt and shame and fear and everything else that gets locked in, did you get any sense of an organization? I mean, I said about the Elm Guest House because it's a ring, right? And I don't think people fully understand what that means. A ring.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I didn't originally. I mean, I heard a lot of conspiracy theory, and a lot of it. I've got to say, I wasn't really into conspiracy at all in any way whatsoever. I just wanted to diminish it and just say, look, this is just ridiculous. Some of this stuff is just way above, what you might think. And I really am grounded when it comes to these kind of things. But actually, the truth of the matter is, the more that I investigated this, the more that I looked at it, the more that I read, the more that I did my own research, because I really wanted to look into Grafton Close and its surroundings as well. I did a whole geography situation where I looked at all of the areas and all of the things that had gone on in that area, and there are some surprising ones that come into its remit. When I did that, I thought to myself, okay, well, this must have been at that time, because obviously you've got to remember, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have any of those things going on at the time. These people must have been in communication with each other in some format. Yeah. There is no way that these people operated in such close proximity and not had any idea that the other was doing what they were doing without the other doing what they were doing. There there must have been at some level of format in which they communicated. And what kept popping up in most of these cases was Holland and Amsterdam. It kept coming up all the time. And I never really got to the bottom of the full connection with all of these individuals. The other thing that popped up was the Spartacus situation as well, with the Spartacus club. And that raised alarm bells too, because it was fairly clear to me that if you're a member of this thing, you certainly would have known other people that were paedophiles as well. So that level of communication would have been there too. But I'm pretty sure there were other forms of or levels of comms in terms of these guys being able to communicate with each other to know where they could perpetrate these children from should they want to abuse them.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary, really, if you think how they did that, but it's as old as the hills. So all the kind of, I don't like using the term honeypot, but there's not really a better term I can think of, but like children's homes, Boy Scouts, schools, all the tennis clubs, football clubs. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Did you during your research, where did you find the best information that helped you on your path over the last decade?
I think media, really, looking at old media and old media stories that had already been well researched by investigative journalists, and discovering lots of connections and stories that they were looked at even back in the 70s and 80s. And then connecting the dots, really, and looking at it and just thinking, well, this is all part and parcel of the same thing. Because I have to remember, I'm working kind of from the inside out. I was in Grafton Close, so I'm aware of kind of what was what. I know some of the staff. I've actually spoken to a couple of the staff members in my journey to investigate more, to try and find out more information. I've spoken to a lot of the survivors, some that are already known, that are out there in the media that you can see and hear now, and others that have not waived their anonymity that haven't been named yet. And some that haven't even come forward to the police have come forward to me and spoken and told me their stories since I've come forward. And I found the connections in all of those, and some of the media reports that I read, it all comes together. It's all linked together, and the story just starts to spread. And you look at it and you just think, this wasn't this. I mean, this McSweeney and Stingmore situation that came out of Operation Fernbridge was, as far as I'm concerned, just a tip of the iceberg.
Well, it's interesting you say the term tip of the iceberg, because that's exactly what we grew. You and I, similar age, and we grew up in a country where paedophiles were prime ministers, and it's top down, isn't it? And now we've just had Andrew Mandelson arrest. Interesting. We'll go into that a bit deeper in a minute. But for the viewers, I'm putting Keith's Twitter handle there, because it's very important if you're watching this when you find people like Keith, you do follow them and you do amplify his voice. I think that's really, really important, because that's one of the powers that we now have that we didn't have, 20 years ago. And I think that's extraordinary. And part of my journey with the research for all of this involved, I had a lot of personal experiences throughout my whole life with pedophiles and organized pedophiles, and pedophiles in the football club, pedophiles in the school, pedophiles in the church that grew up around me. Unfortunately, didn't have any in the family, but it's everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mention those things, because all of those things that you mentioned are all actually covers for pedophiles.
Yeah,
they use it as cover.
Yeah, and they are well protected, especially if they're in an organized thing. This is why the first question I asked you was about the police that first investigated. It seemed ridiculous to me that they couldn't find this guy. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, it is ridiculous. Absolutely. And it was frustrating for me. And, I have my own personal thoughts on it. But, institutional cover-up and institutional paedophiles have been around for decades. And that hasn't changed. We still are in that situation. And I really do wonder whether or not we'll ever get to the bottom of rooting it out fully. I don't think we ever will, because obviously we know that paedophilia is something that's been around for forever, really. But the way that it's permeated these situations, permeated these institutions, I find it extremely frustrating.
You have so many obstacles. I mean, I'm about to publish a book about satanic ritual abuse in Ireland, which involves paedophilia, obviously. And getting this book out, the biggest obstacle is the other family members that are trying to stop it come out.
Yeah.
That's hard for a lot of people, but it seems to me that you had that obstacle was removed by the fact that you were disassociated from or disenfranchised from your family.
Yeah.
So you were very much alone, and that obviously. Did you have any people close to you that tried to stop you coming out about this?
It didn't stop me. But they were. Let's say there's been zero support in me achieving justice, which you would expect to be the opposite.
Yeah. But you've received more support now, presumably. You said you've talked to lots of other survivors. Has that been a good process for you?
Yeah, it has been. Yeah, because certainly in terms of the Grafton Close, because that one was really puzzling me more than anything else. It really got to me that we couldn't get any closer to understanding what really was going on and why inside a children's home you weren't any safer.
You're less safe.
Yeah, you're less safe. Yeah, let's put it that way. You've gone from one situation into a far worse situation.
Yeah.
And then discovering, all the events that had gone on there and how that came about, it kind of, it was helpful me to fully understand that and listen to other survivors and their stories and what happened to them. I just found it extraordinary. I just thought, this was some sort of level of madness, but actually when you come to terms with it, you start to look at it on a reality basis, and you start to investigate further things around it. You kind of see why it has come about. And Grafton Close wasn't the only children's home. I mean, there were multiple children's homes across London where this abuse was being perpetrated from.
Well, all over the world, actually. I mean,
it's a global issue. I mean, the numbers are extraordinary.
They really are.
Yeah, I wasn't aware. I was completely naive until I started to look into it. And even now, some of the numbers are the ones we even know about, are in the millions in this country, adult survivors. Well, and I thought it was extraordinary. I really did.
It is extraordinary. And there's a lot of, it's from their point of view, it's an information war as well. And there were, back in the 2010s, there was, I don't know if you're familiar with this website. I'm just going to pull it up for everybody, because this is a useful thing. You guys watching, this is I'm going to show you a website now that doesn't exist anymore, and I'm going to show you how to find these websites, because the more knowledge you have as a viewer, even if you've never been a victim of child abuse in any way, the more this is all about empowering all of us. Because to me, Keith is a young boy that is living, and he's a grown man now, but to me, I can see everything he's been through, and it's just so important to share this stuff. And one site in particular that I found very useful over the years was, now this is called archive.org, and there was a website on WordPress called thecolemanexperience.wordpress.com. Have you heard of that site?
I haven't, no.
So because I used to be an internet marketer before COVID, this is how you find old websites. So I can go back here to 2017, and this is every time that website got logged. And I can go to a snapshot of that website from that time. And I don't know what I'm clicking on here. I don't know what's going to come up. But it was The Weird World of Harvey Proctor, who was, of course, a very bad MP pedophile. And there's lots of stuff here that you can dig into. Look, who knows the truth about Britain's missing care children? That's under satanic abuse. Now, I was going to actually bring that up, if I may. I'll leave a link to that below, guys. You can go and do your own research, and I read every single article on that website over the years. It's extraordinary, and I don't know who's behind that website, but I know that everything on there is true. It's really extraordinary, which is why it got taken down. That's one of the reasons why there's a ticking clock in my poem at the start of this show, because one of the things that they used to say was, every time they expose somebody, they go, tick-tock goes the clock at the end of the articles, which is exactly, because I'm optimistic that this is the thing that's going to bring down the government. It's going to bring down the royal family. It's going to bring down every structure that we know of in the world, because I do think this is all going to be exposed. Just because I'm an optimist and I want it to be exposed, and I want to help it to be exposed, because one child being abused is too many.
Yeah, of course.
So I've lost my thread there, because I had all these memories about reading all those articles all those years ago. I was going to ask you about did you ever encounter any satanic elements to what happened to you?
No. Not in that sense, no. But I have had others talk to me about it, but and I have had other people come to me and say that it's real and it happens and it goes on. But I really haven't had time to look into it any further and investigate it, and I should read up more about it. I should investigate a little bit more, because I think it broadens my view, certainly, on how I see things. I think really initially, over the last few years, I've only been focused on Grafton Place Children's Home, the surrounding areas, and trying to piece together as much information as I could and investigate that to eventually show everybody out there that all these connections fit, and this is how it was all perpetrated, and this was the ring, and this is what was going on, and this is why it was happening. And really about what it feeds into. And I'm sure the satanic part of it is going to come into that at some point, because it seems to touch every single abuse case that I look at. Somewhere on the line, there is that level or that level up here somewhere where it exists. I need to look into it more.
Well, my theory is that everything feeds into that. Whether that is happening at the children's home, or maybe some of those children get fed in, like they were getting fed into Elm Guest House, and I think ultimately it is satanic. And people watching might not realize that during the 1970s there was an organization in London, in one of the councils, like this one, called the Paedophile Information Exchange, which Harriet Harman was part of, Patricia Hodge was part of. These are long-term Labour MPs, and
both interesting characters,
shocking characters. They wanted to get the age of consent down to 5 years old, I think it was, or maybe less. And they still They stayed in Parliament for decades. It's
Yeah.
like it is extraordinary, but then it isn't when you realize. I mean, it was so openly talked about. There was civil servant on a Panorama show about 20 years ago who openly talked about the fact that their job was to get MPs out of trouble if it involved little boys.
Yeah,
there was.
I saw that clip. Yeah, and that again was interesting. But I think really on the whole, I mean, at a societal level, at a normal everyday societal level, the problem is to try and get society to understand when we talk about satanic child abuse that it actually is a thing, and it does exist. And I don't think society are really ready to quite open their ears up and listen to it, because it sounds too extreme for them.
That's what I was going to ask you, because they literally do that when I talk.
Yeah, because it is literally a thing of like, oh, it's ridiculous. What are you talking about? Don't want to know about that. That's absolutely rubbish. You know, of course, there's no satanic child abuse. You know, that is the go-to. You know, that's how it is. Even sometimes when you're talking about child abuse itself, sexual child abuse itself, and how it's perpetrated, society is not really quite ready to listen to that. But I think the more that we see, like we've seen with Jimmy Savile, we've seen, you know, the Prince Andrew thing, we've seen Mandelson recently, you know, some of these high profile cases, when they do come about, actually make society look up and say, well, wait a minute, you know, there is something in this. Well, in fact, there always has been, but it's just not out there in the media. So if it's not out in the media, it hasn't been validated. Just because you and I sit here and talk about it and have a discussion on a podcast doesn't validate the fact that actually satanic abuse and sexual child abuse exists for the general society, for much of the public. But I think if it's done on a media platform that's, I don't know, one of the big MSM media platforms, suddenly it becomes validated, and therefore it's okay to believe that it's right. That's the problem that we have, and trying to jump that barrier to make sure that actually everybody realizes that this stuff that really does exist. It does happen. It does go on. And some of it's horrific. But if we don't get to that point, we don't get to the mainstream media, if you like, to pick this up on a much bigger scale, to really investigate it properly and show what's gone on and listen to these people that have been through it and show that it does happen, then we're never going to get there. Unfortunately, some of those actors that are in that position are preventing that from happening.
Well, you know, they're very sly in the way that they do it, because whenever it gets close, like when Tom Watson stood up in Parliament, I believe he was part of it, and that was a role assigned to him. That's why he got made a Lord, right? Because he wasn't much as good as an MP. And then you've got that famous clip when Cameron was on This Morning with Schofield, and they had the piece of paper in his hand.
Yeah.
What that really did, you know, what I pieced together about that was, because at the time I was like, oh, maybe it's actually going to come out. And what really is that they put it so close to your face that you couldn't see it. That's what hidden in plain sight means. But also, they were sending a message to all the victims or survivors. I mean, I don't like using the word victims, but
victims or survivors, I'm happy with both, really. But I understand why survivors is used.
Yeah. The message is, you know, this is never going to go anywhere. That's what happened, you know, because Cameron was complicit in all of that, as much as everybody, as much as Schofield, who ended up being kicked off for his questionable behavior, shall we say. But then you've got people like Hugh Edwards, who getting nothing, no, you know, didn't get anything really, did he? And what, you know, and these are household names, and the message is constantly, and the reason I understand this is because before my Nan passed, I confronted her about what happened to my dad, and I said, Nan, why, you knew about this, why didn't you do anything at the time? And she just looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she just said, we were scared, because this was a pillar of society, this was a lay preacher, you know, this was they didn't, people, this is the same story I hear again and again and again. Even the parents are terrified of the shame in this country. I'm in the west of Ireland, you know, this country riddled with paedophilia, with the Catholic Church. Yep. And what did they do? They shipped all the priests out of the country and replaced them with Indians and Indonesians. And, you know, you can't go in there, you can't find an Irish Catholic priest anymore because they've all been shipped out. I'm generalizing, obviously, but, you know, this is pretty much what happened. And then what happens is you get entire societies turning their back on the church and therefore turning their back on God. And then you've got a kind of godless society then that, you know, puts God and the church in the same bracket. And, you know, when they use, I mean, there's nothing more satanic than using the, you know, God as the cover story, you know, which happens a huge amount, obviously.
Yeah. That's huge in itself.
Because there was a Catholic priest that your children, Grafton Close, wasn't there? That was also he got jailed as well, didn't he?
McSweeney got jailed. Yeah, Stingmore died before he got to court.
Well, this happens as well. I mean, that's the thing with Savile. He got away with it his entire life. It wasn't until after he died. But thank God that those survivors came forward and started speaking about it. But then you watch all the documentaries and the dramatizations that are kind of subtly rewriting history and saying, oh, it wasn't that bad. But when you were speaking then about the mainstream media, what came to mind was there was an article. I mean, there were articles about Savile and the child abuse, but and a little bit on the necrophilia. But there was an article once, I think, in the Daily Mirror that when Savile was heard chanting "Hail Satana," and you know, I got my last YouTube channel taken off air completely because I linked Savile to Schofield, to Ian Fleming, to Aleister Crowley, right back to John Dee. He was Queen Elizabeth I polyglot, magician, physicist, everything. Which was interesting because why would they take an entire channel down for a video that said that? Because, you know, because it was it was over the target basically, and that's why all these in your life since you decided to be public, Keith, is there any kind of organized fight back going on apart from, you know, just linking up with other survivors?
When you say organized fight back, do you mean
well, you know, like the pedophiles get organized, they set up the pedophile information exchange and they set up all these rings and,
you mean survivors are they fighting back?
Yeah,
I mean, I have to say, on the whole, as far as I can see, yes, they are, by speaking out and telling their story, telling their truth, if you like, and the likes of me coming forward and standing up and saying, well, look, you know, it's happened, but not every survivor, not every victim has the ability or the personality to not to want to do it or can do it. Which is a real shame because I'd like to see more be empowered to do that. And there isn't any, there's not enough organisation to around to achieve that. And it is, even with the platforms that we see now, there isn't enough support, in my view, to be able to achieve it. To be able to go and say, well, look, you know, this is what's happened to me, and I want to speak out about it, and I want something done about it because it was wrong. Justice never seems to really achieve that for the victims and the survivors. It never does, and we see that now in the grooming gangs, you know, that are currently going on. It just isn't enough, and there's a lack of want to do it from government, and it was always questionable as to why. But it seems clear to me that there is no interest in making it right for survivors. We're constantly suppressed, constantly pushed down. So to achieve that end, someone once said to me when I came forward, "What is your intention? Are you going to end up doing something like the post office scenario?" And I just laughed and I said, "This is way bigger than the post office scenario." Not to knock the post office scenario because that was a bad situation, but you know, to say that I could never lead anything like that because it's way bigger than any one person. It has to be something seismic to be able to show society just how bad and prolific this has been over the last 50 years. It's extraordinary.
It is. And, you know, Rupert Lowe published the first aspects of the rape gang inquiry a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
And one of the most horrific parts of that was that there were cop nights.
Yep.
And the children were trafficked by police.
Yep.
Now, I've interviewed Jeanette Archer. Have you heard of Jeanette Archer?
I haven't, no. Is she one of the survivors from that?
No, she was a survivor of royal satanic ritual abuse.
Okay.
She saw the Queen turn into a lizard in front of her underneath Windsor Castle, and she's an amazing woman. And what was I talking about? I've lost my thread again because I'm seeing Jeanette's face, and then I'm trying to think about what I was. Back to the she was trafficked by police, and they would prepare her for the ceremonies for weeks in a dungeon by raping her as a child. That's how they prepared her for the ceremonies. I mean, it's like you said, it's so dark that people literally can't believe that another human being could do that to a child. It's just unbelievable, actually. And the conclusion I've come to is that most of them are not human. I don't know whether you came to that conclusion, or they've got no soul, or something's wrong there. I mean, beyond, it's not.
It's the level of depravity is questionable. We could find all the apparatus to excuse it, or to say that it's this mental health, it's this level of whatever, and there is lots of that out there. But I think actually, as a lay person, myself, and I've got a son myself, so to think that you could get to that point, I've always questioned it, and I speak to my wife now, and I just say I just cannot fathom what it is where you are in a position where you need to abuse a child in that level of depravity. I mean, what is it that makes a human function in that way? And I've never got to the bottom of it, even though I've been a victim myself of abuse, and I've been in that position where I am being abused. I still question the adult mind, that makes them go and do that, and why it exists, and what it is that makes them go forward to do that, to the levels that they do.
Well, I wrote a book about it. It's called Weapons of Mass Protection: Practical Tools for Spiritual Warfare, because I believe it's demonic entities.
It's something more than, because of the amount that's out there, and we're seeing more and more and more and more of it, and the platforms where it's allowed to be perpetrated. I'm finding it more and more extraordinary that it continues on. It just doesn't fit as I say, in this normal level of a society that we're all supposed to be brought up with, and we all understand as being normal society. It just is so beyond the realms of people understanding it completely. So I think somewhere on the line we need to connect those dots.
We do.
And I think the more that people come forward, the more that we talk about it, the more discussions we have around it. And I think that it needs to be in all formats. The better.
Yeah, it's podcasts, it's books, it's articles, it's videos, it's films, it's as much as you can manage to put together, which is why what you're doing is so important. And I really appreciate you sharing all of this with me today. Let's finish up on talking about where you think we're at in this sort of post. I mean, I've known this stuff for a long time, but now we have millions of people looking through the Epstein files, and the Epstein files are really all about satanic ritual child abuse.
When Epstein's situation first came about, when we started to hear about it, and I don't think really people really understood the depths of where that went and the connections. So I think having those survivors come forward in the way that they did, and the persistence is what was key. And then to achieve a snapshot of the files that have come out, and to see what's in that, it really is. I'm going to describe it as a snowflake on top of the iceberg, and that is my view of it. Because from what I can see, and from my own experience, there's far more, and I don't think it'll ever be released, because if it was, it would blow a hole in what we're currently seeing today. I think what we're allowed to see is what we feel as being plausible and passable, and scapegoats used to achieve an end, to close the lid on it.
Is that what you think that's all about? You think it's all about putting a lid on it once and for all, or do you think the genie's out of the bottle and it can't go back in now?
I think we've always had a situation where they've put a lid on it. I think that's always been, and I think they'll try and achieve it again. There's all sorts of distractions that go on. I mean, we had a whole flurry of media recently. Yeah, I know that there's a thing going on here. We got a war going on in Iran, etc. But that has taken up all of the media space completely, and we don't hear anything about Epstein or any of those things at the moment going on. There's none of that that's happening.
Yeah, the war's very handy in that respect, isn't it?
Yeah, if you like. But I think, ultimately, I think we have the likes of Mandelson, we have the likes of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, as is known. I think they are basically scapegoats. They are pawns now that have been used to achieve an end, to say, okay, let's draw a line under this and put a lid on it. I think, my own opinion, when I've looked at all this myself, I've gone through the whole situation and I looked at it as a geographical thing, really, more than anything else, which is where it really opened my eyes up. And I looked at it and I thought, this spreads much further than what we're seeing. It really does. And why are we not investigating it as a whole? In fact, why is my own case not being fully investigated, given the connections that are in just my case? It was all separated up and investigated individually and dealt with that way. There was no connection in it at all, and I found that quite extraordinary too, because it was connected. There is connections in it, and it wasn't. And I feel the same happens with lots of these other cases that we see. They deliberately don't join the dots.
Okay, so what's next for you? Where are you going next with this?
Exposure.
Just more exposure. So if you're
the more exposure. I'm, as I say, I've been currently investigating this for nearly 2 years now. A lot of the stuff that I've investigated isn't out there. I've not put it out for all sorts of reasons. The stuff that I've found, stuff that I've discovered, the links that I've come across, and I've done that for multiple reasons, really, because I'm not quite ready to produce that yet. But I will. It will be out there. I will put it out there, and I think we're going to get the skepticism. We're going to get people that say that this doesn't. Again, this is too much to deal with. But there is a reality to this, and I'm a survivor, and there isn't anybody more on the ground than me. And when I look at this, I just think there are too many coincidences, if you like, and there can't be coincidences in this. There are too many. There are too many connections. It's all too close together to sit there and say, yeah, this is not how it's connected. It is, but I just need to join up a few more dots. So yeah, exposure, and making sure that institutions like Richmond upon Thames Council take full responsibility for what had gone on within that one children's home. There are multiple others that they ran, but this particular one, which we know about, because they never did. They've never apologised to any of the survivors fully, and it's extraordinary, really.
Well, I've put your Twitter handle on here again to remind you guys, follow Keith, share his stuff, help with this. If you are watching this and you have a podcast, get in touch with Keith, get him out and get this story out. I think the final thing I'd like to ask you, Keith, is have you managed to retain any kind of spirituality throughout all of this? Or, because I know that for a long time I turned my back on all of that and I had to find my way back to it. What about you? Have you... Nothing. It just wipes it out. It just doesn't exist anymore. It isn't there. I mean, it's all very numb, and that's all I can say. It just doesn't exist. Wow. Well, if I can help you in any way, let me know. And sure. Thank you for sharing your story and coming on.
More than happy to do that.
Yeah. Have you got a book coming out?
I haven't personally, but I do know one of the survivors, one of the significant survivors of Grafton Close, is currently writing one, and they're near to the end of it. And from what I've had discussions with that particular person, it's going to be a very interesting one. They've done years of research.
Well, yeah, I'd like to read that, and I think books are a big part of this war. So let me know if you do, and if we can help you in any way, we will. But thank you for sharing all of that, and I'm sorry you've been through all of that. But we really, you know, if it wasn't for Virginia Roberts, the Epstein files wouldn't be out. You know, so
Exactly.
every survivor that tells a story is another chip in the bricks of their walls against us. But thank you so much for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.